phrase, "they just don't make 'em like they used to," is used quite often these days, usually by folks trying to cling to the media they grew up with, as it gets replaced with what they view as inferior works. Having said this, I don't mean to denigrate those who express this opinion, because despite only being in my 20s, I find that most of the media I hold to be well-made usually originates from prior to the mid-2000s. The video I present you with today concerns one such piece of media. Origin Systems' 1995 action game, Crusader, No Remorse. I'm Doompope, this is a look back at Crusader No Remorse, and I hope that by the end of this video, you'll understand why I hold this game in high regard. Crusader occupies a gameplay niche that I haven't seen replicated anywhere else. From casual observation, Crusader appears as though it would be a twin-stick shooter, but it's not. The game is controlled in a manner similar to early Resident Evil titles, or anything else which uses similar tank controls. The game even features fixed camera positions that it will snap between as you navigate the environment. The character can rotate between 8 directions while in a normal stance, and in a combat stance this is increased to 16 directions for more granular aiming. Movement is handled with the arrow keys or the numpad, and you can rotate the character with your mouse, but I don't really recommend that. The mouse aiming isn't what you'd expect. Moving the mouse along the x-axis rotates the character, and it lacks the precision of keyboard aiming. It's all around not a very precise way to control the game, and you're more likely to get yourself into trouble trying to play it that way. Now, having said all that, I would like to point out that once you get accustomed to them, the controls are actually pretty good. You have a lot of control over your character, with the ability to run, make smaller steps, dodge roll, and perform a jump with absolutely immaculate form, and it's all done with just your preferred movement keys and 3 modifiers that depend on whether you're using the arrow keys or the numpad. A lot of the critiques I've seen on this game call the controls clunky, and usually they add the caveat that, oh, well, it's an older game, so you'd expect it to have clunky controls. And while I must admit, they aren't as smooth as they perhaps could be, it contributes to the game's feel in a major way. The way you move and fight in this game lends itself towards a rhythm that I haven't seen in many other places. You have to observe your surroundings from cover, determine a course of action to neutralize any threats, and then quickly execute that plan. If the controls were more fluid, it would be very easy to just sprint into a room and gun everything down, and that's an experience you can get in hundreds of other games. Now that I've gotten the elephant in the room out of the way, we can talk about the rest of the gameplay. After a couple of introductory cutscenes, the game drops you into the deep end of its first level. There's no tutorial or hand-holding, just you, your gun, and a building full of bad guys. Every mission has its own set of objectives that you have to complete, which can vary from blowing up a generator in the first mission here, to disabling production of an experimental combat robot, or even rescuing POWs. The stuff the game throws at you is fairly varied, though the environments are often a bit samey, pretty much only cycling through industrial facilities, offices, and high-tech research facilities. The game's basically linear, though you almost always have several ways of passing through a given obstacle, usually ranging from tracking down a keycard or security code to open a door, or just laying down some plastic explosives and sending the thing into orbit with expedited shipping. You can even remotely control combat bots in certain levels, allowing you to dispose of threats without endangering yourself. You've also got a number of environmental hazards to watch out for, stuff like toxic waste and explosive barrels, which are both usually only in the more industrial environments, as well as force fields, tripwires, security cameras, and gun turrets. Those are pretty much universal to all the level sets. In the interest of fairness, I also have to point out that the game does have its share of frustrating elements. It can oftentimes be quite hard to get the character to actually target what you want him to, as the aiming is done largely by a system which locks onto the thing nearest your point of aim. It usually works without issue, but sometimes objects get in the way when you wouldn't expect them to, like office chairs, desk lamps, things like that, and relatively rarely, it fails completely and inexplicably. The game features a health and armor system, not too dissimilar to what you'd see in Doom or similar titles, with the player being able to acquire more powerful shields which offer better protection, and better batteries which allow you to take more damage before the shield shuts down. There is one thing that the shield offers no protection against, and that's explosives, which is a pretty fair deal, I think. The issue comes into play in the later levels, or earlier depending on the difficulty you select, but we'll get to that later. When the game begins to assail you with copious amounts of combat robots armed with twin rocket launchers. These rocket launchers will kill you in 2 hits on lower difficulties and 1 on the higher. While getting curb stomped by Ed 209 isn't the most enjoyable thing in the world, it does help sell the tone of the game's setting, and encourages the player to think strategically rather than trying to be Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando. You have a pretty big selection of tools at your disposal to get the job done in Crusader. You've got some standard weapons like you'd expect, a pistol, shotgun, and machine gun, but as you get further into the game, you'll get access to more exotic weapons and upgraded versions of the earlier ones. The starting pistol can be replaced with one that does a bit more damage and fires faster, the machine gun gets a similar replacement, and the shotgun gets replaced with what can only be described as a Gatling shotgun, which is kinda slick. The more exotic entries in your arsenal are energy weapons, which are all fairly powerful, but instead of using ammo, they draw power from the same battery as your shield, creating a balancing act between the two. The energy weapons range from the humble laser pistol, to an EMP gun for taking out robots, a laser rifle, a plasma gun, and even an experimental pulse gun, which will drain your suit in a handful of shots, but vaporizes most enemies in 1 shot. And you also get access to 2 explosive weapons, a grenade launcher and a rocket launcher. The grenade launcher functions identically to the rocket launcher, the only difference being ammo and damage, so you don't have to worry about arcing the projectiles or anything. This game's not quite that advanced. And I should quickly note, get the rocket launcher over the grenade launcher. It's far more powerful. It makes the grenade launcher look like a Nerf gun. It's important at this point to note that you can only carry 5 weapons at a time, so you've got to pick the weapons you feel are the most useful. But trust me, 5 is more than enough to sometimes forget to use everything you've got on you. In addition to all the firepower you get in this game, you also have some other tricks up your sleeve. You've got landmines, remote bombs, you even get an explosive robot spider, which is my personal favorite. It solves just about any problem you might face. A security camera placed in a way you can't easily shoot it without it seeing you first. Spider bomb. A couple of guards clustered close together. Spider bomb. A laser turret with no way around. Spider bomb. Sometimes. Those turrets come in 2 varieties, one of which can't be destroyed as far as I can tell. You've also got portable medkits and energy cells, and a very expensive EMP device which uses a ton of your suit power, but temporarily shuts down nearby robots, which is kind of a must-have late game. I've so far neglected to talk about the way the game handles difficulty. Upon starting a new game, you're presented with the choice of 4 difficulty levels: Mama's Boy, Weekend Warrior, Loose Cannon, and finally, No Remorse. The difficulty you select determines the number and type of enemies you'll find in each level, the items you'll find, and how much damage you give and take. The game treats Loose Cannon as its standard difficulty, and it's the one I'd recommend. Another thing worth noting is that the loot drops on No Remorse are the same as Weekend Warrior. According to the designers, you need a lot of ammo and medkits to survive. As you progress through the game, the enemies you encounter will slowly shift from humble security guards armed only with handguns, to soldiers with machine guns or laser rifles, to elite stormtroopers carrying lasers, high-end shields, and occasionally rocket launchers. In the last few missions, you'll have to deal with these spaceball-looking assholes. And they do not mess around. They're armed with the pulse gun I mentioned earlier, so you have to be on high alert if you don't want them to turn you into a puddle.
Keep firing, assholes!
There's also a handful of civilian types which you can encounter, from factory workers, office personnel, to government officials. With the exception of the senators, who are armed, The rest of them won't try to kill you, so you can ignore the civilians. However, it's not worth it, and you should just gun down everything that moves. They might trigger alarms if you let them live, and they can drop cash that you will need. Just remember, you're the hero. Nobody's gonna care how many 9-to-5 workers you gun down in your quest to save the world. And the robots also get the same treatment as the guards, starting off fairly weak, armed with shotguns, pistols, machine guns, and whatnot, but later they get replaced with tougher and better armed versions that I'd rather take my chances diving through a plate glass window than fighting head on. Crusader begins with a cold open. 3 silencers, one of whom is you, are on the run, fearing they're going to be killed for refusing to execute unarmed civilians. Their fears are quickly realized as a robot guns down 2 of them, but you manage to get to cover and take it out with a grenade. After your friends are murdered, you decide it's time to stop working for the evil world government and defect to the Resistance. Seeing as you're a member of what's effectively this world's version of the SS, the Resistance don't fully trust you and give you a pretty tough first mission to prove yourself, which is the reason you get dropped into the deep end. After completing your objective, you're contacted by Wizard, a Resistance hacker who acts as your way in and out of missions, sort of your handler. He rewires teleport networks to get you in and out. He instructs you on where you need to go to get out, and then sends you packing to the rebel hideout.
I had to rewire the transport grids for 3 whole sectors just to get this jump point, and I can't guarantee if I'll be able to hold it for long. So you best be quick. Wizard out.
Here is where the game begins properly, as the rebel base acts as a breather between missions, where you can interact with various characters, most of whom do not trust you a bit initially, and Weasel, an arms dealer who is perhaps the most 90s thing in this whole game.
Weasel's the name. Selling weapons is my game. The finest of consortium plunder brought to you at low, low prices. Hey, I do it for free, but a man's got to pay his people, you know. Also, I got to take care of my little baby. Baby. This stuff isn't exactly easy to come by either, if you know what I mean. So tell me, Captain, what can I do for you today? Huh?
Technicians, engineers, hundreds of people who will be able to feed their children tonight so those children can grow up big and strong and have little teeny-weeny children of their own, and so on and so forth.
You can also watch the news if you want to see how they put a spin on your actions.
Minutes ago, Resistance terrorists firebombed an allotment center in Sector A-17, which will leave thousands of innocent citizens without food or housing for weeks to come. Firefighters are currently on the scene, struggling to put out the blaze before it spreads to nearby corporate dormitories. There's been no word yet on the number of casualties in this latest atrocity, but officials speculate that the death toll could rise as high as several hundred before everyone has been accounted for.
At this point, I'm sure you've noticed this game makes heavy use of full motion video cutscenes. The acting is for the most part very cheesy, but I think that's part of the charm. It gives the game this sense of hyper-reality. Absolutely everything is over the top, to the point that it makes the elements that are treated more seriously feel more real by comparison. I wish that FMV hadn't gone out of style so quickly. It's got a serious charm to it, but I may just feel that way because of how much I adore the games I've played that make use of it. Now I'm going to talk about the rest of the plot now, so if you don't want the game spoiled for you, now's the time to stop watching the video and go play it for yourself, which I would highly encourage you do. As you complete more missions, characters at the HQ will grow increasingly friendly towards you, and will eventually even call you a comrade. After a few missions, the cigar-chomping Colonel Ely sends you to a prison where a bunch of captured rebel soldiers are being held. Unfortunately, the mission goes sideways and the mad scientist in charge of the prison kills them all just as you arrive.
Well, if you've come for the prisoners, take them. You see, they'll be of no use to anyone now. Take them back to your pitiful comrades as a promise of the future from Dr. Gregor Hoffman.
Conveniently, one woman survives this as she was being held separately, and she makes her escape with you.
So if you're here to rescue me, let's get the hell out of here. More guards are bound to show up soon.
I'm sure there's nothing to worry about here at all. Throughout your missions, you'll get to see small glimpses of the antagonist, Chairman Dragon.
Risky proposition, Mr. Chairman. Even for something as admirable as...
Dragon is pulling the strings behind a plan to bring down the Resistance once and for all. In addition to this, as you work to undermine Dragon, it becomes clear that there's a mole somewhere in the Resistance, as the WEC seems to always be one step ahead of you.
I'm glad you made it out of there, Tin Man. I really am. I have no idea what gave those troopers the idea to cut their jump pads off from their power grid. I mean, they went up with their own nerve gas. They couldn't get out. I don't know. Maybe it was standing orders or something.
I wonder who the mole could be. After a mission of high importance comes up, Colonel Ely elects to undertake it himself. But it turns out to be a setup and he's captured. This results in Sergeant Brooks being revealed as the traitor, which makes perfect sense. Since all of her friends and family were murdered by the WEC, she would obviously betray the Resistance just because she doesn't like you.
Like this. I don't know whether to salute you or shoot you. I grew up in the Resistance. I watched better men and women than you die for a better cause than the one you blindly follow. Or is that followed?
So you carry on, business as usual, with Major Vargas, the woman you rescued earlier, graciously taking over in the absence of Ely. You continue to work to stop Dragon's plans, eventually learning of an experimental orbital platform, codenamed Vigilance, which acts as a control center for numerous weapon satellites, which he intends to use to destroy any cities which do not comply with the WEC. Vargas sends you on a mission into an even higher security prison, where she believes Ely is being held. But oh wait, that's right, it's a trap, because no one could have seen this Shyamalan-level twist coming. Vargas is the real traitor, and she framed Brooks for it.
What a surprise. I seem to have underestimated you yet again. Or more appropriately, I seem to have overestimated my soldiers. But no matter.
Fortunately, you're a certified badass at this point, and the ambush doesn't work. So you begin searching for a way out. Unfortunately, Ely isn't held at this facility, but Brooks is, so you bust her out and hightail it to the Resistance HQ before Vargas can get away. Sadly, you're too late. Vargas is gone and the WEC has turned the place into a graveyard. Everyone is dead except for you and Brooks. At this point, General Maxis, the guy from the start of the game, contacts you directly with a Hail Mary plan to get aboard the Vigilance platform and destroy it.
Our only chance to stop the Consortium's plans is to attack the platform directly.
Following the intel provided you by General Maxis, you head to the Hawking Space Center and steal a supply shuttle to get aboard the platform. And from there, it's basically the same plan as Mission 1. Find the generator and blow it to bits. Doing this leaves you with little time to get to an escape pod, and after fighting through heavy resistance, you come face to face with Vargas. The two of you battle for the escape pod, and it takes some doing to kill her. She has an incredibly powerful shield for some reason, so you have to hit her a lot. I wouldn't say the fight is remotely difficult, though, and it feels a little anticlimactic. After she's dealt with, you board the escape pod and head for freedom. While in flight, Dragon contacts you and basically gives you the usual, "You may have stopped me for now, but I'll get you later" speech. And on that note, the game ends, with a fairly climactic ending, all things considered, but with enough loose ends to allow for a sequel, which it would get a year later in the form of Crusader No Regret. The game's production was overseen by Warren Spector, though only in a managerial capacity, with the game largely being the brainchild of lead designer and programmer Tony Zurovic. I point this out because I feel that Crusader is part of the family tree that ultimately led to Deus Ex, which is an amazing game in its own right, and we might cover it here in the future. You can see a lot of shared elements between the two titles, both in gameplay and to a much lesser extent in the story. Hell, even the music in both games shares common ancestry. It's part of this design philosophy that Origin Systems cultivated at the time, which branched out into other studios like Looking Glass, Ion Storm Austin, and Arcane, up until recently. Crusader isn't quite what I would classify as an immersive sim, but it's close. An overlooked link in the evolutionary path. The game's soundtrack, composed by Andrew Sega and Dan Gardapi, is not the usual MIDI or even CD audio one would expect from the time. It makes use of a proprietary tracker system called Asylum, which gives the game's score a particular feel that is really only found in the early Unreal games, I think. This is fitting, as Sega would go on to work on the soundtrack for Unreal and Unreal Tournament. You just don't get this kind of music anymore, and that's a real shame. Crusader's OST has soul and personality, in a way most games don't anymore. The game runs on an enhanced version of the Pagan engine, which was developed for Ultima 8. This allowed the game to have, for the time, very high-resolution SVGA graphics. Compromises had to be made to allow the game to run well, however. The camera was originally intended to follow the character, but this produced unacceptable levels of stuttering, so the fixed camera system was chosen to alleviate the issue. Zurovic had big plans for the game's sequel, but EA, the publisher, wanted it within a year. So No Regret was made as a compromise while plans were made for a proper sequel in the form of No Mercy, which was to be a true 3D game and have many enhanced features. Sadly, EA didn't pay Zurovic all the money they had promised him for No Remorse and No Regret, so he departed the company shortly after completing No Regret. Without Zurovic at the helm, the series died, which was likely for the best. It's a shame that when you get a good thing like Crusader, a company like EA always seems to be waiting in the wings to smash it with a hammer. And now, they parade the rotting carcass of Origin Systems around, using it as their digital storefront. But try as they might, you can't keep good developers down, and a lot of Origin employees would go on to do great things on their own. I'll be covering a lot of the games these people would go on to make, but we're not done with the Silencer's story yet, so join me next time when we'll be taking a look back at Crusader No Regret.
Congratulations, traitor. You have unraveled my plans to crush the Resistance for now. I shall be forced to spend months in interminable Senate hearings about Kiev's destruction, not to mention reinforcing the public's opinion of President Gauthier's actions in this matter. So, as a way of expressing my gratitude for your timely service, I shall allow you your small victory. But rest assured, Silencer, I shall not forget about you. The world is a small place to hide.